Welcome, everyone. I would note amongst our participants today are attendees at WUSC's International Forum and members of WUSC's local committee network, students, faculty, and staff from across Canada who work tirelessly to provide higher education and resettlement opportunities to refugees. Moreover, today's discussion on refugee education is core to our mission as an organization and as a Canadian and global network. Now, a central component of this work and a theme informing today's discussion is a concerted effort to give greater voice, agency, and leadership to those who have the lived experience of being displaced. Although this is an online event, I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous lands that I am residing on here in Canada and the Indigenous lands around the world that many of our international participants are joining us from today. I am joining this conversation on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people and acknowledge the long-standing presence of Indigenous peoples in this territory. Now, we're taking time to acknowledge this not only because settler Canadians, including myself, need to integrate this knowledge into our everyday lives, but also to highlight for our Canadian audiences that experiences of displacement, which we will be talking about today, are also something that have happened and continue to happen here in Canada. So today we are joined by 4 distinguished panelists to learn more about Canada's recently launched Together for Learning campaign on refugee education. We are thrilled to have the Honorable Karina Gold, Minister of International Development, lead us in this important conversation. And she is joined by 3 outstanding advocates for refugee education, 2 of whom now sit on the newly formed Refugee Education Council, which gathers young people with lived experiences related to displacement to help guide the direction of this new campaign. With us today are Emily Fabian, a candidate in the dual master's degree in public policy and global affairs at Sciences Po Paris and the University of Toronto. She is also a WUSC board member. Ella Inanahazwe, a refugee college guidance counselor in Rwanda with Kepler, an organization that provides students in East Africa with access to higher education. And Fonny Joyce Vuni, the co-chair of the UNHCR's Global Youth Advisory Council and a co-founder of the YEMI initiative, which aims to enable youth to realize and utilize their full potential. So we are grateful to the 4 of you for taking time in your busy afternoons and evenings to join us here today. And I would like to now invite Minister Gold to tell us a little bit more about Canada's new Together for Learning campaign and to open the conversation with our fellow guests. Minister Gold.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, and thank you to WUSC for hosting today's event. I think this is absolutely terrific, and I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have. I also just wanted to let participants know that I'm joining from Burlington, Ontario, which our territory is mutually covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belts Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Ojibwe, and other allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. I would also like to acknowledge that the land on which I gather is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And so, I think the point that you raised about recognizing displacement as something that happens everywhere in the world and as part of human history is really important. And it's also the aspect of it being human, right? That we're talking about humans. We're talking about people who are being displaced, often forcibly, at times by choice to flee violence, to flee disaster, who at the end of the day are people with dreams and hopes and aspirations. And for me, when we talk about refugees and refugee education, part of it is about refocusing what the image of that we have of refugees and who refugees are. And so I often think about, conversations that I had as a member of parliament when the government of Canada had the Syrian refugee commitment, where we brought over 50,000 Syrian refugees to Canada. And some conversations that I had with people in my community who said, but they have cell phones, right? Like, how are they refugees? And the conversation that I often had was, well, they're people who, because of situations that are often beyond their control, are forced to leave their homes, their communities, and sometimes their countries for safety, for themselves. And we're talking about people like you and me who were used to going to the grocery store and taking their kids to school and wanted a better life for their children's future, just like we do. It's the same, common objective that we all have and we all share. And that's why talking about education for refugees is so important, because we all have an obligation to ensure basic needs are met when it comes to food, when it comes to shelter, when it comes to security. But if any of you participated in the wonderful conversation that we had a week ago when we launched the Together for Learning campaign, and Amélie was part of that, we talked about education as hope for the future. It's about nourishing hope and aspirations and providing a safe place for children to grow and to learn, and actually for people at all ages. And I think it also demonstrates that people who have been displaced either internally in their countries or beyond their borders of their homelands, is recognizing that basic humanity and the potential that they have, that is untapped in many ways because of the status that they might find themselves in. And so for me, this is a really exciting initiative that the government of Canada is launching, because it's about making those connections and it's about providing those opportunities and ensuring that refugee voices are helping to lead the conversation. Which is why I'm even more excited about the Refugee Education Council, which a couple of you are part of, because it means that you're going to be representing the lived experiences of people who have experienced displacement, and helping inform the government of Canada, both in the campaign that we're launching, but also in the objectives that we're trying to pursue, and hopefully the programming that will follow with that. And so I think this is an exciting initiative. I think it's one where we're all going to learn from each other and hopefully get greater buy-in from other countries around the world to recognize the inherent value that people who have been displaced represent. So with that, I think I would like to kick off the conversation, because you're actually not here to listen to me. You're actually here to listen to these three incredible young women who have incredible experiences and are doing incredible work already. So maybe what I'll just do to kick it off is I'll turn just by order of my screen in terms of who I see, to Amélie, Fonny, and then Ella, just to quickly introduce yourselves, and maybe say very quickly to you why, where you are, where you're from, and why education for refugees matters to you. So Amélie, over to you.
Sure. It's good to see you again, Minister. My name is Amélie. Been mentioned. I'm a student in public policy and global affairs. I'm calling in or joining this call from Montreal today. And to your question, why I think refugee education is important. I mean, for one, I have a personal connection to this cause, because of it's been my experience where I grew up as a refugee in Malawi. My family is originally from Rwanda, and it's really education that has brought me to the opportunities that I have today. And so I think for one, I think that's an opportunity that should be extended to everyone, really. And beyond that, really, education is important for the obvious reasons that everyone gets an education, first of all, but particularly for refugee girls, it's important because of the empowerment that comes with being educated. Being empowered allows you to pursue your ambitions, to defend yourself, to demand your rights, to demand better from society and from our leaders. And and even just beyond that, I think if we want to think practically, an education gives you skills, and these skills allow you to contribute to society. They allow you to get a job and to take care of your family, for example. And yeah, I think maybe to also just take it back to again, my personal experience, the being in school or being educated exposes you to different cultures, to different experiences that other people have had, which for the most part disputes all this like these notions that we've been raised with of limitations that have been placed on your life as a girl, especially for refugee girls. And so I think beyond the hardcore skills, it opens your mind, exposes you to different ways of life that then inform how you also live your life, and pushes you to pursue your ambitions, because it is possible. So I would end it there.
Well, that's great. And I'm sure we'll unpack that throughout the conversation. So Phony, how about you?
Thank you so much. I think it's a pleasure being here and talking about education that is so close to my heart. My name is Phony Joyce. I'm joining you guys all from Nairobi, Kenya, from South Sudan. I'm a South Sudanese refugee living in Kenya. Why is education important, especially for refugees? I think for me, really, it's education gives refugees the opportunity to take power back. You find that most of the time, after you've been displaced, you have to rely on other people to give you basic needs, to explore your potential. You really have to rely on other people, and education gives us the chance to really think beyond what is the box that has been created by society, to really go out and look at the possibility of what can I do. That's what it did for me. That's what it has done for my sibling. That's what it has done for many people within the community. So that's why I will always advocate for education, because it gives you the power back. It gives you dignity.
That's pretty powerful, Phony. Thank you for sharing that. Ella.
Thank you so much. It's also a pleasure for me to be one of the speakers in today's discussion. As mentioned, my name is Ella Ininahaze. I'm from Burundi and currently a refugee in Rwanda, in Kigali. I work with Kepler, and Kepler provide international degree to both refugees and nationals. So I work as a refugee college guidance counselor with Kepler. And to come to your question, why education mattered to me? So I wouldn't be here if I didn't get the chance to access quality education. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't in a country where refugees are given the right to work. So I'm here as a refugee college guidance counselor because I had the chance to compete on the job market like anyone else. But I would say again that education for refugees, it gives them a chance to be integrated in the society and to fully live like citizens. They have a membership, they are members in the nation, and they can fully participate in the country, and they have the right to dream, they have goals to pursue their goals, and they get a chance also to support their family, like Emily mentioned, and they have a chance also to empower their community, to bring the changes where they are living, to be trusted, and to feel like they are valued. So that's what I would say. Education gave me the chance to unlock all those dreams that I had and that I didn't think that I would be able to achieve in my asylum country, but I was given all those chances. So that's why I feel like I keep fighting for education for refugees. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ella, and thank you to the three of you. I mean, I think you raised such important reasons. I mean, all three of you kind of talked about empowerment, about taking power back, about having the autonomy and agency to pursue your future, right? I think often when you're in a situation of displacement, that notion of the agency to determine your future is something that people might feel is not as possible. And the point about education and integration and being a valued member of society, I think is so important. I'm wondering maybe if building off of these themes and education And Amelie talked about it a little bit, but maybe we could talk a little bit more about why it's important to also think about refugee girls and boys, and girls specifically, right? What this means for girls. I recall a conversation that I had with Filippo Grandi, the head of UNHCR, and talking about the fact that Canada has this Charlevoix commitment for girls' education. We want girls to be educated everywhere around the world. And then we started talking about refugees and talking about the fact that there are a lot of refugee children who are not in school right now. And so maybe you could talk about what that means for girls and for their futures. Maybe we'll go in reverse order and we'll start Ella and then Foni and then Amelie.
Thank you so much. That's really an incredible question. So I will kind of reflect on my experience and then so that to answer your question. I remember when I started working at Kepler as a refugee college guidance counselor, my first project was to support 30 women that were admitted at Kepler and that were living in Kiziba camp where we have our second campus. So those girls, when I started the project, I had to help them to get ready for higher education. So they had to spend 2 months with me and getting ready for higher education. And I remember the first things that I saw in those faces, they were scared. Not because they didn't believe, they didn't trust that they were able to do that, but because it was a chance that they didn't expect to have, because a higher education opportunity in refugee camp are really limited. And when we talk about girls, it's even worse. So they were scared how they're going to perform. But when I look at them now, when they are completing their bachelor's, some of them are working on their internship, some of them are planning to continue with their master's degree. So now they are empowered. Now they want to bring the changes in the community. I have so many girls that I trained, and now they are having projects in the camp, supporting kids, like training other refugee women to get ready for higher education. Now they are thinking that it's going to be possible for them to continue their study, even earning a master, doing a PhD. And now marriage is not their first dream, because they used to think that maybe after secondary school that we get married, because they don't see where the opportunity will come from. And when they get that chance, they were so surprised, and now they're putting all their self into that, and they're working harder to make it, and they are being provided with quality education that lead to employment, meaningful employment. And now they see that they are living in a country where the right to work is accessible to refugees. Now they are dreaming. Now they are seeing themselves in the future as someone who can empower other women, the community, their sisters and brothers. So that's why I think that empowering girls and supporting refugee girls to continue their studies is really quite something good and impactful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I got chills as you were talking about that, because it's just talking about, like, giving them back the power, as you were saying, Foni Joyce, right? Like it's
Yeah.
really about that. Do you maybe want to add on to that?
Yeah, I really want to add on to that. I think it's really giving them back the power. I think most of the time we have conversations or we have discussion around how women are vulnerable, but the reality is they're actually not vulnerable. It's just circumstances that end up making them vulnerable. And because these circumstances will make them vulnerable, they'll miss out on a lot of opportunities. And why is education really important for girls and women? I think for me, just reflecting back on the experience I've had growing up in a house where my dad was really persistent about, you're a girl, you're a boy, you're all going to go to school. You'll go to school, because education is kind of like, it gives you that future, it gives you that hope. I love the fact that we would talk about, you get the education, you go to school, you explore the potential. You explore the potential, you understand it. Once you're able to understand it, then you're able to kind of like figure out, okay, I'm good at this, I can do this, I can really do this myself. It goes back to I am able to really step out of this circumstance I'm in and look out and see what is available for me out there. And I think that is why education is really important. It's most of the time we talk about education and look at it as, well, let's say education is important for girls, but I think we need to change the narrative and look at it as girls are not vulnerable. It's only the circumstances they're in that makes them vulnerable. And once they have the opportunity, they have equal ground to go out, become great people like Amelie and Ella and many other young people we know, many other young women. So it's really about looking at these are the circumstances that inhibit women or girls having access to education and tackling the root causes. Because I think if we only focus on, you're a girl, you can't do this, you can't go out because of ABC, it makes it very complicated. We're not dealing with the root causes. Once we're able to deal with the root causes, then we make sure that young girls are able to access education. The other reason I feel education is really important and valuable, especially for women and girls, we get the capacity to participate in issues regarding our communities, issues regarding peace building, issues regarding protection of other people within the community. Practical example, I was able to take part in the South Sudanese peace dialogue. And if I had not had the opportunity to really have my education, I don't think I would have meaningfully contributed to this particular process, because education enabled me to understand the process. It also led me to see what is my role in actually attaining peace within my country. So I think these are some of the important themes that really need to come as we're advocating for girl child education. We also really need to think about how are they actually going to contribute. I mean, for a lack of, I don't want to call out anyone or any country or anything, but most of the time you'll find that in a big room where we have many men sitting, I'm not attacking any men. Men are awesome. Like, they defend us and they're always with us and they will partner with us and they'll work with us. But the reality is that when you look at it critically, when girls are on those particular tables, the only reason they'll have girls there is maybe because you don't have this particular qualification, you will take notes for me. Because you don't have this, you will do this for me. And we can turn this around. I got education. My sister will get education. Other generation will get education. We'll still call out for many girls to get this particular education, because we're not just people who will contribute by taking notes, but we will contribute by actually bringing substance to the table, to the discussion. And this is something that we always need to consider when we're thinking about how do we advocate for girl child education. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. You guys are so exciting. That's great. I love flipping vulnerability on its head, right? And talking about, no, girls, you know what? Girls and women are strong. They're capable. We just have to make sure they have the space, right? And the opportunity to pursue, their futures. And I think that's really exciting. And maybe Phony Joyce, I would add you to the list of incredible people and women that you mentioned with Ella and Amelie, because I think that's so cool. And also, just the point about realizing your potential as an actor and an agent and making a change, right? And that, it's not about being on the sidelines and watching, it's about being right there in the middle of it and contributing to your community. Super exciting. Okay, Amelie, I saw you waving your hand that you wanted to jump in, so go for it.
No, it was more like, yes, what is being said here is giving me chills as well. I really don't have much to add. I think what Phony and Ella have touched on are really compelling reasons why refugee girls should be educated, and also maybe just to bring it to the present. If you look around, the Zoom room, but if you look around the room, these are all refugee women who got the opportunity, and what instantly comes to mind after that is, how can I give back to my community? How can I make sure that the opportunities that I had are tenfold and more and more girls get educated? There's one of my favorite sayings. I don't know who said this, but it was along the lines of, if you educate a woman, you educate an entire village. Because the first instinct that that I've noticed among women or girls is they think about their communities. They think, oh, I had this opportunity. I was limited by society saying a woman should not be educated. No, I got an education, so I'm not special, There's more women who can do what I did. There's more girls who can do what I did. But how do we create that space to make them active agents in their life? Truly, that is all I would say. I think when there's the tendency to always think back to your community. How can I take these opportunities back? So one of the reasons I think refugee girls should be educated.
Absolutely. And I'm actually not a refugee, but the three of you are on this panel, but I'm the granddaughter of refugees who made it to Canada. And you know, for them, when the conversations that we had, education was important for all of the reasons that you're talking about integrating into society, about being valued and trusted members of society, and being able to pursue objectives that they didn't have, right? Like my grandmother was 16 when she had to flee the Czech Republic because of World War II, and she never got to go back to school. And, you know, that for her was always such an important thing for her children and grandchildren, you know, in terms of the opportunities that it can afford us. Amélie, talking about, you know, what we can do for our community and opening space, right? I mean, I think that's part of it. And I mean, I get so excited when we talk about this, because it really is about broadening the tent, about or tearing the walls down, if you will, right? And enabling people, no matter where they live, no matter what circumstance they find themselves in, to have those opportunities. And I think that's one of the things that excites me about this. I'm hoping that maybe we can shift gears a little bit and talk about, you know, what the three of you kind of expect from Canada, you know, in terms of this campaign, in terms of the work that the council can do. Ella, one of the things that you said that struck me was you were talking about being in a country where you have the right to compete for jobs, right? So there are places where it's hard for refugees to access an education, but then there are additional barriers as well. And so, you know, when we're thinking about this campaign, I mean, our objective is to make sure that all refugee and displaced children have access to an education, but it can't end there, right? We can't end it with education. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on, you know, what you would like to see from Canada in all of this. So maybe we'll start with Phony Joyce this time, and then go to Ella, and then go to Amélie.
Sure. Practically speaking, you'll go to places when talking about access to education, and we'll hear this constantly. Every community will go to. I've worked with over 1,000 young people, and every single time education comes as one of the top priority. Why do they put this as their top priority? Because out of the experience, out of whatever happens, either formal or informal education, this is the one thing that they will take back with them. This is the one thing that after they're told you have to go back to your country, or you have to come back from your country of resettlement, they'll still take that particular education, that particular skills with them. So I think what I would like to see really is ensuring that there's access in terms at the different levels, at the primary level, at the secondary level, at the tertiary level. That it begins there. We can't say that we will provide education at the primary level and then forget the secondary level and then forget the university level. There has to be a balance, whether it's the normal university or colleges, there has to be a balance between access to these different levels of education. That's the first thing. The second thing I think that really needs to happen is that education for refugee should not be seen as something that they're being given. It's their right. It's the basic human right. It is their basic human right. So there shouldn't be all these needs like listing down, well, we will have food first and then shelter and then education later. Because I think once we're able to identify and still advocate around education as a basic human right that dignifies someone, then access to education at the different level will become easy. Why do I say this? Even till right now, within my community, we have young kids who don't have birth certificate. So which means that if you actually go to the primary level education, you can't sit for the national exam. That's already a form of exclusion. If you get to the secondary level, the documentation still plays. We have policies that still does not favor refugees. So for me, what I would really want to see is that we translate all the work that we've been doing at the global level to reflect at the local level. one practical experience I had as I was doing my advocacy and all that. One day, there's a lady, a friend to my mom came home, and she was so excited, and she was just looking for me, and I kept on asking, why is she looking for me? We all have stories and all that, but she told me, she just came and she said, Phony, I have a message for you. My son said thank you. Then I kept on wondering, why is the son saying thank you? And the son said that because of the efforts that we've been doing through the network that we're part of with Ella and other young people, the effort that many other people have been doing, the quota for scholarships were increased. And once they were increased, he was actually able to get that one scholarship that took him to the next level. So I think for me, it's really looking at moving away from too much talk, moving away from too much signing, too much paper, and moving to action. Action meaning that if you're at the global level, if the quota was 10, we only received 10 scholarships, then increase it to 15, like slowly increasing these chances so that young people, refugees, would have access to that. And that's what I would practically want to see, that we move away from just talk to practical stuff.
Hear, hear. Okay, so Ella, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah. Funny, well said. I really loved what you said about balance, like making sure that if we're providing primary scholarship, secondary scholarship, let's do the same with higher education. Because students, when they're attending primary school and secondary school, they see themselves, maybe I want to be a doctor. I started dreaming about my career when I was in primary school. So, and I expect that to be the same with refugees. So if they don't see themselves growing and they don't see the pathway clearly, it's going to be hard for them to stick in the school. That's the reason why sometimes we acknowledge a lot of number of dropout of school from refugee students, because they don't see why they're doing that if I'm going to be only done with primary and I won't get the chance to go in secondary school. And another thing that I really want to highlight is the quality we provide. So we need to make sure we provide quality education to both nationals and refugees, not only just providing trainings like 1 month training. Let's just give them to compete for those scholarships. Let's give them the chance to access quality education that can lead to meaningful employment. That's what we do at Kepler. So we have both nationals and refugees as well, and both of them, they receive the same quality education, because we want to make sure that all of our students are able to compete on the job market like anyone else. So this is the second thing I want to mention. And the last thing is to make sure that when we provide funds, like when we provide scholarship, let's follow up. Let's not just do the first year. Sometimes that's something that we have been acknowledging in the TRS, and some students, they got the chance to get the scholarship, but the next year is not the same thing, and they are stuck, and maybe they were done with the first year, and the second year, they are not able to complete with the second year. That's really discouraged students. Let's make sure that we are consistent in what we're doing. Those are the three things that I wanted to highlight, and I'm expecting to see the changes in the future. Thank you.
Great. Amélie.
Every time I have to go last, I'm asking myself why.
You'll go first next time.
Speaking after Phony and Ella is it's a very tough.
It's not tough.
To follow. It's very tough. But to your question, Minister, what do I expect from the government of Canada from this initiative that's been announced? I expect the government of Canada to be more ambitious, to realize that pushing for the education of refugees, for all refugees at all levels, as been highlighted by the other two speakers, is something that is not beyond our reach. It's something that is doable. We can bring together all actors on the global and the local level to make it happen. One thing I like to talk about when you think about refugee youth, one thing we have to understand is that they do not differ from any other youth from anywhere in the world. I've been in Canada for 6 years now. I've had the opportunity opportunity to I have great young Canadian friends. I've met young people who are international students, some of who are immigrants. We all have the same aspirations. We want to be educated, we want financial security, and in the sense of refugees, they want a physical security. So when, even as leaders, as politicians, as policymakers, that is the perspective we need to keep in mind. If this was a young person, imagine being a young person, knowing you want to contribute, knowing you want to participate, but the only barrier is this political status that you have no control over. So I think if we can think about that issue in that way, these are young people who have aspirations, same aspirations as our nationals, and all we are doing at our governments to make sure our people are educated should be the same level of effort, should be the same level of tenacity that is given to this cause. Now, Canada is not alone in this, right? There are a lot of countries that can be mobilized to care about refugee education. This is literally a basic human right. We have young people who are not getting educated. I don't understand why people are able to like let that happen. These are young people. That's a lot of potential. And so I expect the government of Canada to go beyond the refugee education goal that they have with this initiative and to push for more pathways, to realize that they're not alone in this, that they can mobilize support from the local and the international level, because it is not ridiculous to expect young people to be educated. It is not their fault that they're refugees. Like, the least we can do is give them those opportunities to build a different life and to make sure that their children, their grandchildren do not go through the same predicaments that they've been faced with. You know, we have protracted crises around the world, so we cannot sit down and wait for people to go back to their home countries to get an education. All of these transitions take many years. It's not fair for someone to sit down and say, maybe I'll get educated in 15 years. That's ridiculous. And I think the government of Canada can play a huge role. We have a lot of soft power on the global stage. It's time to start using it for something very important like refugee education. That's what I'll say.
All right. Okay, good. Well, I think we have our marching orders. I've taken notes here, but I think, you know, what each of you highlighted is that education is a right. And it's as much as a right to having food security. It's as much as a right to having protection. It is an absolute inherent right to be educated, to have an opportunity for your future. And I think that's one of the exciting things. It's always surprising to see that you have to fight for education, right? I mean, I think, you know, when I talk to boys and girls in school classes in Canada, you know, to have them imagine a world or a situation where they wouldn't be able to go to school because school wouldn't exist for them, right? I think it puts it into a big perspective and what that means for their lives and growing up and their opportunities. And I think, as each of you have said so beautifully, I mean, it doesn't matter where you live, what your experience was, you know, why you are where you are. Education should be unquestionable. And so I'm excited about this. And I think, you know, the points about it's not just primary education either, right? I mean, there has to be that path to growth. There has to be those paths to opportunity. I can't think of anything sadder than, you know, well, I can think of lots of sad things, but something very sad is, you know, seeing a little boy or a little girl who has dreams to do something and have those you know, just quashed because they just can't move on to the next level because that level doesn't exist for them, right? And the lost opportunity and the lost potential and the loss for the world, really, because you don't know what that person may have been able to achieve had those paths been open to them. So I think that's so important. And then, you know, the point about dignity, right? I mean, this is about human dignity as well, right? And treating people like people and giving them access to those same opportunities. So I I'm so grateful to have all of your passion and energy, and no doubt with each of you pushing us along and pushing us to do more and to do better. I think that's going to be wonderful and really, really important. So I know we just have a few minutes left, and we're supposed to be having a free-flowing conversation. So I did want to open it up to the three of you to either pose me questions or to pose each other questions, because the three of you have actually more interesting perspectives, I think, than I do. But you know, just to open it up. So Amélie, you know, you're the one that gets to go first this time. So feel free just to open it up. It can be to me, or it can just be for the group as well.
I think my question really is for you, Minister, but also Phony and Joyce, please feel free to pitch in. But Ella spoke about how being able to participate in the local, like in the society of Rwanda, has allowed her to get to where she is, being able to be employed, to be employed, sorry, and also to participate in general is what I'm getting at. What role do you think the government of Canada can play, again, on the global stage, to advocate for local integration of refugees, of young people? Because again, we know the scholarships are limited. WUSC is doing a great job. They bring about 170 students, probably more, someone correct me, per year. But that does not even reflect the need that is out there. So being able to participate at the local level is quite important, but we need governments to open up policies and to make space. Is this a task that Canada can play a role in?
I think so. And I think that, you know, we have an experience to demonstrate how refugee integration has been such a huge success in our own country, right? You know, so I think that we can, you know, lead by example in that regard, but also have those conversations. And one of the things that we've been doing in recent years that I think has been really kind of transformative is that a lot of our support to refugee communities is also providing support at the same time to refugee host communities as well. And I think that this is really important, so that you don't get into a situation where there's tension between you know, a refugee camp and a host community, and continuing to push that along, and to really, you know, showcase the benefits of integrating people into communities, and giving them those opportunities to contribute. I mean, it's you know, a story, like there's so many stories. I think of Tarek Haddad, who you know, is a Syrian refugee here in Canada, who has a chocolate shop in his community in Nova Scotia and is employing local Nova Scotians, right? You know, is building community, is giving back to a country that provided him safety. And, you know, thinking about those kinds of stories that we can share, and really, you know, doing our part to advocate for why education matters, but then those next steps, because I think it's those barriers that, you know, that Phony Joyce mentioned about registration, and making sure that there's fulsome participation, and that Ella talks about, you know, having the right to work, are so important, so that you don't limit people either, right? And I think that's so important. I don't know if Ella or Phony Joyce want to comment on either of those.
Yeah, I think one of the things, as Amélie was asking this question, and I kept on reflecting back to the Global Refugee Forum and all the pledges that were made around education, and the movement that, I think it was one of the events that had so much pledges around education. And just thinking about all the pledges that were made there, and then coming back to the local level, having worked with young people within the community and seeing that particular competition, I think one aspect that is really important for even in our advocacy to really continue talking about, to really continue fighting for, to really continue amplifying, is the fact that we live in the community where we are being hosted. Mm-hmm. So as much as we're advocating for the refugee education, you'll still find that the system or the quality of education within that particular community is not sufficient. So they will decide, they'll have to pick, and this is the sad reality. Most people will have to pick. They'll have to pick whether they will want to focus on their nationals, or will they want to focus on refugees? So I think a lot of emphasis also has to go back to re-educating people on how to integrate, how to share some of these spaces together, because I think it has already created tension, it has already created competition, whereby people have particular stereotypes or perceptions around, well, refugees will get education from so and so, refugees will get education from so and so. So I think that's one thing that really needs to be looked into, rethinking how, when we're talking about integration and localization, how do we ensure that even the immediate community that receives refugees are able to benefit? We have refugees living in the camps, we have refugees living in the urban areas. So these are some of the things that need to be considered if we were to actually have a more robust education system, whereby even the nationals will become advocates for refugee education. Because I think right now, it's only refugees and partly some of the nationals who understand the plight of refugees who've become advocates. But I think there's so much power in having the people that you live around also becoming champions for you. And I think with this particular, the campaign we're trying to launch, I think that is what we're also supposed to look at. How do we create the nationals to also become champions and not see refugees as competition or migrants as competition within their community? So I think if we take that approach as compared to from the high level, then coming to the grassroots, it won't work. We have to rethink how we're offering, how we're delivering services, and how we're working with people, and start from the local level going upwards.
Yeah, great points. Ella?
Yeah, Emily and Fonny highlighted all the things, but I have a specific question for you. So as I mentioned in my introduction, that I really want to see quality education provided to refugees and to make sure that they have the right to work, that they can compete on the job market. So I would love to understand, to know, is there anything that the government of Canada is doing or planning to do to advocate or help refugees to access the right to work in asylum country? I'm not talking about Canada only. I'm talking like in my region, it's only in Rwanda where refugees have the access to work, the right to work. So what the government of Canada is planning or trying to do to make sure that other governments are embracing, are buying the idea of giving the right to work for refugees.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm really glad that it came up, because I think it adds on to what we're trying to achieve, right? I mean, in terms of what our objectives are with the campaign. I mean, at the end of the day, the objective is to ensure human dignity and fulfillment. And, you know, we can't limit ourselves in terms of thinking, you know, it's just about getting kids into school, right? It has to be, you know, kids in school is the avenue to that greater objective. And so trying to understand what the barriers are in terms of enabling that future is really important. And so I think continuing to do this advocacy, right? And it's going to be different based on different countries, right? Because, you know, I mean, Rwanda is different from Kenya, which is different from Jordan, which is different from Lebanon. And I mean, the list goes on, right? And so looking to build partnerships, you know, through the work that we're doing in different countries, I think is really important. And having these conversations both at the international level, but also on a bilateral level is going to be really important. But that's also why having your voices help inform this, I think, is crucial, because it enables us to better understand what differences there are in different places. We have an overall global objective, but the way to get there might be different in different countries and different places. And so that's why your voices are so important. Fonny Joyce, did you have any questions, since Emily and Ella both got theirs in?
If you don't, I have the perfect question for you.
Okay.
I'll hint mine, half question, and give you more time to proceed. I think one of the things, as much as we will still continue advocating for education and calling out for education, one of the things that sometimes I feel is sidelined is peace the peace building aspect,
Mhm.
as much as we're looking for, I don't know, I don't think it's durable solution. I don't know if those ones are the terms of durable solutions. Partly it's true, partly not true. But I think, what is the Canadian government doing to address the root causes that is causing conflict within the different countries that refugees are coming from? Because I think as much as we'll have refugees who are in this particular country, we'll have other people who will return. And some of them will return if there's a good system where they can actually access education, or they feel confident. And I think that's also one area in the broader perspective that should also be looked into, and discussion should go into that. So I think maybe just give me an idea about what is Canada doing towards also bringing people to really resolve all this conflict. Because I think this conflict, the reasons of all the issues we're facing, the misunderstanding, the lack of dignity and all of that. So like, what are some of the efforts that are going into this, trying to at least resolve some of these issues that have existed for such a long period of years?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question. And the peace building initiatives that we have, again, vary in different places in the world. But I think one of the things that we recognize is that in order for there to be peace, there has to be civil society participation. We have to address the root causes of conflict. And again, in different areas, that could be different things. But I mean, often it's because of exclusion, right? And, exclusion of different groups, exclusion based on, poverty or access to opportunities. And so taking a holistic approach to peace building that says, we're bringing in local participants. We have big contributions when it comes to women peace builders and the women peace and security agenda, recognizing how important women's voices are in helping to build peace, but then also towards contributing to a lasting peace as well, is really, really important. And we have Jackie O'Neill, who is our exceptional women peace and security ambassador, who is really kind of working with people all around the world to push this agenda forward. It's also about, creating economic opportunities. I think that, that is one that is so important, right? Because when people don't have hope and they don't have the means to care for themselves, sometimes they're forced to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do as well. And they're more easily recruited to activities that, don't contribute to peace. And so looking at it from that holistic lens, I think is really important. And then supporting local actors, most importantly, to be those voices and to gain space into those conversations, I think is another really important role that Canada can and does play, is making sure that we're bringing civil society and local voices into peace negotiations, into conversations around peace building, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to local communities as well. I see that we're running low on time, and I'm getting text messages that I'm supposed to kind of wrap things up. I could keep talking to the three of you probably for the rest of the day. This is such a wonderful conversation. Amelie, jump in with your last question.
Yes, Minister.
And then we'll turn. And sorry, Chris.
Thank you for that. It's really, there's a question in the chat that I know took a lot of courage to ask, and I want to bring your attention. I'm not sure there's an answer, but I do think it's an issue that deserves your attention. So if you don't mind, I'll quickly read the question. Okay, so it says, Dear Honorable Karina Gold, I really like the question that you asked, particularly on what Canada can do to support refugee education. My question is, over the past years, Rwandan refugee youth specifically have recently experienced barriers at the immigration interview level to come to Canada through the WUSC student refugee program. While it is not clear how things have changed at the immigration level in Canada, I would love for the Canadian government to consider looking into this issue. From my experience, we have experienced high dropout rates, even in elementary and secondary school. Those who perform well at secondary level sometimes end up into forced early marriages, especially the girls. This is just beyond sad. Some young boys have become victims of abduction and getting involved as child soldiers, which is very inhumane and unfair for any child. I know a number of girls who are heavily mentally affected, and sadly, one young boy who recently committed suicide. We are starting to see increased mental health problems, especially in young refugees who feel hopeless and helpless. I'm just passing this along to increase the awareness of this issue. I'm wondering if there's something the Canadian government can do to help, especially in the issue of Rwandan refugee youth who are facing more immigration barriers. For context, this is in Malawi. This is an issue that I'm very passionate about. And I do think it merits your attention and it merits being looked into. I just wanted to highlight that. And if you do have an answer, I'm pretty sure the girl who asked this question would appreciate.
Okay, well, Amélie, thank you so much for raising that and for giving voice to this question. I'm going to have to look into the immigration question because I just don't know the answer to that. But I think, you know, part of why we've launched this campaign and why we want the Refugee Education Council is to try and address some of these issues. And really, you know, I mean, everyone's talked about it in some way, shape, or form, but education and being in school provides hope. It provides a safe place. And it also provides, hopefully, what is step towards a more secure future as well. And when we think about child early and forced marriage, I mean, this is something that, you know, Canada is particularly concerned about and has been for a number of years. But I think it's the Malala Fund has estimated that there's going to be an additional 10 million or maybe 13 million child brides because of, you know, girls not being in school. That's not specific to, you know, refugee girls, but it's in general because being out of school, you know, makes girls more vulnerable to child early and forced marriage. So this is a really important issue for girls' agency and autonomy and decision-making about their future, about their protection. You know, the issue that you raised about boys being abducted. I mean, we just saw the news about, you know, boys being abducted, unfortunately, from a school in northern Nigeria. These are real issues, and they all kind of lead back to the question that Phony Joyce asked about peace building as well, right? I mean, these are really important issues that we need to tackle, and so having these conversations, I think, is so important. And so, thank you so much for raising those issues. Okay, Chris has his camera on because otherwise, the four of us are just going to keep talking. So we'll let Chris. But I just want to say a big thank you to the three of you for joining, for sharing your insights, and for what was a really wonderful and actually very inspiring conversation. So, okay, I'll stop. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you to the four of you for an outstanding conversation, and to all of you who participated online, including those of you who posed those really important questions. A really great conversation linking education and how it enables the realization of our aspirations, our hopes for ourselves, our family, our friends, how it helps us to take back power, exercise our rights, how it is a right in and of itself, and how it allows us to participate more fully in the countries that we live. A great and varied conversation that also highlighted some of the challenges that we have to collectively tackle. You know, refugees should have the exact same access to the quality of education that the rest of us take for granted. For example, that they need to have access to the same full range of education opportunities. We as an international community focus a lot on primary education, very much well-deserved, but that's just a starting point, I think, for our commitment to ensuring that everyone has access to the education that they deserve. Some really good questions on and discussion on host communities and making sure that we are also attentive to their needs, their rights, opportunities for host community youth and children, and a really critical piece around the enabling environment in which displaced people find themselves. The majority of people are not going to come to Canada. And so we need to think about the context in which those people find themselves so that opportunities are expanded there. But there are challenges also related to the level of commitment that we make to this cause, this issue that's at the heart of this discussion. And there was a great challenge from one of our panelists for all of us, Canada, and for all of us to do more. So I put that to all of you. Let us try and do more. Let us commit ourselves to doing more. I'd also invite all of you who have joined us today to continue to engage in this important conversation. Please share your reflections, ideas, solutions, issues on refugee education on social media through the hashtag Together for Learning. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with you all online. So all of you, thank you very much for joining us again today. And our panelists, thank you for an outstanding conversation.